I believe along that line that my job is a dream, that somehow or other the possibility that I could spend my days and nights reading and thinking, and when talking to writers. I think, yes, that in the culture we're living in, it's entirely inappropriate for people on radio and television to be berating and insulting books. There are enough of them to like, and they're just hastening the inevitable, that within an imaginable future, which was once completely unimaginable, there will be large, huge numbers of people not reading, do not want to read, hating reading, although having been taught what Hans Magnus Enzensberger calls second-order illiteracy. They can read the newspaper, they can work with an instruction manual, they can keep a bank book balanced, they can pay their taxes, but they can't read something they don't understand. Why? Because incomprehension was never taught to them. Because they grew up reading Run, Dog, Run, 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 Go, Dog, Go. You can't not understand it. You can learn how to read, but there's no reason to reread it. And all of our children virtually are taught this way. It was not the way they always were taught. They were taught, my mother was, my grandmother was, in addition to how to read, there were readers that contained things that were impossible for a child to read. Do you know that both here in America and in England, a second to fourth grade reader contained the fairy scenes from A Midsummer Night's Dream, Wordsworth. Light reading were Poe stories, essays by Emerson, essays by, unfortunately, Carlyle. You can imagine I don't much like Carlyle. And that what you learned by having that reader from second to fourth grade was that in fourth grade you could read things that you couldn't read in second grade. That the light came on. That what was once incomprehensible and painful to feel your way through, what once you had to go to the dictionary for every other word, became readable and enjoyable. And in, sixth grade, maybe you did a production of Midsummer Night's Dream and you were in it and you heard the whole story. And because you were so used to the fairies, you knew already in sixth grade that the wrangling between Titania, Oberon, and their court was the same as the wrangling amongst the groundlings fighting about who will play what, and the four lovers in the forest. That a child could understand this if he knew the fairy scenes well enough. I've spoken to, among others, Jory Graham about whether we couldn't perhaps go into schools and spend time teaching works that the students are too young to understand. Because what does a teacher have to be in order to teach those things? Passionate, wildly caring, so interesting and exciting that you can hold a classroom rapt while they try to read something they're not going to be able yet to understand. This was how people grew more thoughtful when they got older. We teach people not to get it the first day you're taught it. We're going to arrange it all in order, and by the time you leave first grade, you'll be a reader. And then in second grade, you'll read things equally stupid, but a little bit harder. And third grade, fourth grade, probably forever, until you're reading an actual work of literature And by then, I would submit that it's too late for most people, unless they're also reading at home, unless their parents also read. But what you've learned in school is to master what you're given virtually as soon as you see it, because if you don't, you'll fall behind and make trouble for the teacher. A slow learner is the bane of the classroom, as, fascinatingly, now, is a fast learner. A kid, and I, like mentor kids around LA, and, people who, like, meet me and ask me if I'll be there. Sure. How could you say no? Kids who read a lot at home and come into history class having questions because they've read more probably than the teacher are slowing the class down. The teacher doesn't want you to know things in great detail. The teacher wants to know and test you on only things in the textbook and his or her lesson plan. I have watched really brilliant kids be sent to schools for problem children because they are not able to sit still and learn just what they're told. It is so crazy now. So that I have to tell you, when I got sent all of these packets and manuscripts from you, that when I read them, I honestly say that whatever I mean it in my way, that in every single manuscript that I read, and in many cases reread and reread again, because it's not respectful to talk to the writer without knowing the work, although that is what's done on Charlie Rose or on Fresh Air. Someone else reads it and gives the list of questions to the host, who doesn't have the time to do that reading because the program's on every day. How could they, right? Therefore, the book section of any of these popular shows is always the least interesting section, because the host has seen the movie. The host has listened to the record. That only took 40 minutes. The host can't be uninformed about politics. His viewers and listeners will tell him and write in and have a problem. So this host gets to slide when it comes to books and poetry, and much as that bookseller waggled the copy of the Oz book at me, there was Charlie Rose sitting across from Harold Bloom, lifting up a copy of one of the many Bloom books, saying, "So, Harold, what is this about?" Any of you who grow up and are lucky enough to get a publisher to send you on a tour, until you get to me, most of the people who talk to you will not have had time to read the book unless you have inadvertently become already as popular as the very most popular writers. Why would that be? Because if a book is a bestseller, the host had better read it because his listeners may have read it. And if he makes errors or flubs, they'll know. These people never want to be ashamed. If I were one of those people who didn't have a chance to read the work in question, it's where I begin the interview. I have not read this book, and I am talking to you with ignorance. I do not want my listeners to confuse talk born out of ignorance with taught born out of perception and time. But we're not thought to be worthy of this confidence. I mean, I find this such a difficult thing that, it got to the point. They used to talk about, what was it called? The Peter Principle, that people were promoted until they got to the point where they could no longer do their job well. Then they stopped being promoted. But this is like, you get a show that's on one day a week, then you get a show that's on every day, and then you're supposed to cover everything from the news to sports to books, and you are, as you work this way, less and less informed about everything you say and know, and these become, in turn, our most famous commentators. How could we expect any different? Why are we so crazy as not to demand that specialists in each area cover each area? because we've gotten used to a kind of complacency, and because we don't want to be feeling incomprehension. You could listen to television, radio, read newspapers, and most magazines, popular magazines, and never encounter something you don't understand. Do you understand what a nightmare that makes life? Because we all know secretly that there's very little going on in the world that's easy to understand anymore. Certainly not in science, certainly not in math. Those people who used to be able to transform this incomprehensible material into things that we could begin to understand were called teachers. And we don't respect them by and large.